Hello and welcome to the El Camino Studio. Welcome to Lesson 3. Today we're going to do a monochrome black and white graphite pencil drawing of the third page of the Camino coloring book. For this drawing we're going to need just an ordinary HB pencil, the kind of pencil we have kicking around the house or the office. That, an eraser, and maybe some paper towels. Normally when I do a pencil drawing I use various amounts of different hardnesses of pencils. Artist pencils come in very soft, which are the B, part of the HB, and they go, the higher the number the softer the lead is. And a harder pencil is the H, which goes from 1 to 9H, and that gives you a sharper and sharper line. The softer the lead, the more black your shading is going to be, and easier it is to work. So I'm trying to keep this drawing as simple as possible. For this one we'll just use the HB, which gives you not too bad of a control over the drawing, and the only thing is it doesn't give you the extreme darks that you sometimes need. One of the first things you'll notice when you're just working with a graphite pencil as opposed to the pencil crayons is that there's a lot more graphite dust on the paper. So every once in a while just blow off the dust or wipe it off with a paper towel lightly. So to start this drawing I'm going to start in the top right hand corner, and that way I'm not running the risk of rubbing my palm on the paper and smudging the pencil. And like we've did in the watercolor and the pencil crayon before, we're going to start off very light and sort of cover a little bit of everything in the drawing so we can keep track of the balance of the overall page. Most drawings and paintings are usually constructed in layers, and multiple layers, adding each time greater detail, a little bit more saturation, a little bit more contrast. And we do it slowly so that we can always step back and have a look at it and see that it's not getting too out of hand. The temptation is always to start in one corner and try to finish that corner and work your way across and finish as you go. But when you do that, you run the risk of starting off too heavy, and by the time you get to the other side of the page, you have a very dark drawing. And that's not good because we, just like in watercolor, we're always trying to retain the white of the paper. In a black and white drawing, we're doing more than just trying to capture the light and dark, the effect of light. We also have to incorporate into this try to convey subtly the colors of the objects that we're drawing. When you look at the original drawing and in full color, you'll see that the reds are a lot darker than the yellows in saturation, and that when you turn that to black and white, that you'll see that the reds are a darker gray than the yellows. And the same goes for the greens, the lighter greens and the darker greens. They all translate into different values of gray. So it's not just trying to capture the light and dark, it's trying to capture that intensity and weight of the color. So now get started and start shading your drawing, and start light and work your way across the page, and enjoy it, and don't worry about too much at this point because you can't go too far wrong if you work light enough. The next layer will we start shaping the direction of where our shading is going. We're on page 3 of the Camino coloring book, and the Camino coloring book is laid out in sort of a chronological order. The first drawing that we did of Saint Jean Pied de Port was on the French side of the Pyrenees, and that's where the pilgrim starts the 500-mile or 800-kilometer walk to Santiago. This is a third drawing, so this is over the Pyrenees into the Spanish territory, and the view we have here is of a little town called Zubiri, and it is, in translation, means by the bridge. And it was a beautiful little village, and it has the real Basque architecture that we've noticed in the first drawing. And this will change as we get closer and closer to Pamplona. This stone bridge is the first of many stone bridges that we will cross on the way to Santiago. There are so many bridges. I never realized how many rivers and creeks and whatnot there is in Spain. So there's countless bridges of every different shape and size and age and condition. But they all have that handcrafted look to them, where you can see the love that went into them by countless generations in the past that built these bridges for their community. So I'm slowly working my way across the page, and you can see that I'm just trying to give a little hint of the different tonal values of the different objects, and just giving a small indication of where the shadows are going to be. So as I go across, I'm trying to leave as much of the pure white paper as I can. I can go back in the final stages and give little accents of shade and shadow to these white surfaces. I did my Camino in the middle of May and the better part of June. So everything still had that fresh spring green, bright and lush feeling to it. Later on in the summer, everything gets a little more muted, and it loses its bright colors. But as you can see in the scene behind the buildings here, there's a hill or a small mountain, and it's covered in lush trees and forest. And this creates a bit of a problem, because in that monochrome of green, how do we differentiate all the different shades of green and all the different subtleties to make it come to life? So this will be a little bit of a challenge as we go forward to try to bring those trees to life and not have just a big wall of green, or in this case, gray, that is indistinguishable. The next time you're taking a walk in the forest or in the country, spend some time and just take a look at the trees and really sort of analyze what's going on. Every tree is pretty well a different shade of green, and the light shines bright on the top leaves, and the dark leaves underneath are in shade. And see how the saturation of color changes, and how little of the actual green is in the sunny side of the tree. Then you'll start to see that different how one tree is separated from the other tree. If you convert it to a flat plane, how they would separate. In drawing and painting, the more contrast we can give to the light and dark areas, the more three-dimensional these objects will appear. And the same thing applies here, that these areas where one tree overlaps the next, we have to slightly exaggerate the brightness of the leaves in the foreground tree and over darken just a little bit the area that abuts that tree with the trees that are behind it. So we have to massage it a little bit to get that three-dimensional effect going. Another difficulty of drawing trees and landscape is sometimes the lack of built spaces, buildings and man-made structures. When we draw man-made structures, they're usually based on cubes, and cubes in space have vanishing lines that are easy to identify. And this makes it easy in the drawing to understand the three-dimensional space. But in nature, you don't have those natural vanishing lines appearing. So what we have to do in landscape is when we draw it is the only real tool we have is drawing the different objects in fore, middle, and background in scale. The fore objects being larger, and the farther they recede into the drawing, into the background, the smaller they get. Along with that, the objects in the foreground have much more minute detail of the tree or the bush or the plant or whatever it is, and as we get further and further into the background, we have to simplify and just get the overall shapes of the objects and simplify as we go back. And you see on the top of the ridge there that those trees are very simple, quickly drawn, and just have a certain amount of irregularity. And that's all you need to convey the impression of the landscape. So it makes everything just a little bit more complicated when we have to only rely on limited visual tools. Now I've made my way across the page, and I've done a little bit of shading and pencil work all over the drawing. As you can see in the bottom left-hand corner that I'm using a little piece of scrap paper to lay on top of the drawing. This will help me to prevent creating any smudges with my hand as I draw. The one thing I miss the most of when you do a drawing of this pilgrimage, what you miss the most is the smells. When you're walking through this countryside, you smell so many lush spring smells. You smell the farms and a little bit of the livestock, the flowers. There's so many different smells that are so important. They bring back so many memories. I look at these pictures and I can even remember the smells because they're so fresh and clean and rural. No exhaust fumes and smokestacks, and just absolutely gorgeous and beautiful. So this will shortly take us to the end of the first part of this graphite pencil drawing lesson, and we'll continue in the second part with going over multiple more times to get more and more saturation and depth into the picture. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I'll see you on the next one.